Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It's good to be here again. Today, we are continuing our ongoing series, our exploration into the thinking of global leaders.
That's right, and we're picking up with some really, really fascinating material from Lóng Tíng.
We are. His focus this time is on Oceania. And that's,
Yeah.
I mean, that's such a huge and complex area to tackle.
It really is. You're talking about this vast region that includes, major developed nations like Australia and New Zealand, but also all the incredibly diverse cultures and nations of the Pacific Islands.
And he's looking at it through his very unique lens, isn't he? It's this blend of East Asian philosophy and very pragmatic global business insight.
Exactly. And that's what makes his take so compelling. It's not just a sociological study.
No, not at all. The moment I started reading it, I realized this was a deep psychological assessment of an entire generation.
Yeah.
So for you, our listener, our mission today is to go beyond just, listing the challenges facing Oceania's youth. We want to gain absolute clarity on the unique psychological, the cultural, and the economic currents that are shaping their lives right now. And from there, we can start to extract some really applicable insights.
Insights for future leaders, for anyone who's going to be guiding this region over the next decade.
Exactly. And Lóng Tíng, he gets to the heart of it immediately. He says there's this universal quiet question that he's heard everywhere.
Everywhere. It doesn't matter if he's in a busy cafe in Sydney or Auckland, or in a village center in Suva or Apia.
Or Port Vila, Nuku'alofa. The list goes on. The geography is different, but the question is the same.
And that question is, how do I build a future? How do I even start when my roots, my responsibilities, and the reality of the modern world are all pulling me in completely different directions?
It's what he calls the central paradox of potential. And I think this is so important. He stresses that this generation isn't lacking anything. They are not missing creativity or spirit or courage.
No, those things are there in abundance. He's very clear on that. The potential is immense.
But the critical missing element, the thing that's stopping that potential from really firing, is twofold. First, a lack of genuine clarity.
Clarity about their own internal direction.
Yes. And second, a lack of a protected space to actually focus, to just think and define that path for themselves.
And in a world like ours, we often just assume potential is self-actualizing. If you're smart, if you're capable, you'll figure it out. You'll succeed.
Right. It's the whole pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality.
Precisely. But what Lóng Tíng argues is that in a region like Oceania, which is so high context, so communally driven, that individual capability gets diffused. It's spread thin by all these external pressures.
So clarity isn't just a nice to have. It becomes this thing that's constantly being obscured by what he calls a fog of obligation.
A fog of obligation. That's a perfect phrase for it. And because of that fog, finding that protected space to focus, it's not a luxury. He frames it as an urgent act of self-sovereignty.
Self-sovereignty. Wow.
It's the only way to maintain any kind of forward momentum in the face of all those competing demands.
Okay, let's really unpack that. This idea he raises of the bifurcated horizon, this feeling of being constantly stretched.
It's the defining state of uncertainty for this generation in the region. He paints this really powerful picture, almost poetic.
The one about the ground trembling.
Yes, the idea that the horizon stretches out endlessly before you, full of possibility, full of potential, but the actual ground, the path right beneath your feet, is unstable. It's trembling.
That image is so evocative because it just perfectly captures that feeling of having no solid ground to stand on.
It does. The modern world, the internet, globalization, it all presents this boundless horizon of opportunity. But that foundation you need to even start walking towards it, it's being undermined.
Undermined by what specifically?
Relentless economic uncertainty, the sheer weight of cultural duty, and just the incredible speed of global change. It's an exhausting place to be standing.
And he boils that feeling down to being stretched between two worlds. It's a constant tension.
A tension between tradition and modernity. Between the needs of your community and your own individual aspirations.
And between the stability of everything you've ever known and the need to explore and grow, which often means leaving that stability behind.
Exactly. But what's crucial to understand, and he makes this point very clearly, is that this exhaustion, this stretching, it doesn't look the same everywhere. It manifests in dramatically different ways across the region.
It's not a single struggle.
Not at all. And we have to draw a really sharp distinction here. If you look at the two big Western hubs, first, Australia and New Zealand, the pressure is of a very specific kind.
He calls it a performance pressure cooker.
That's it. Young people there are under this extreme duress to perform, to compete, to achieve in a hyper-globalized, credential-heavy environment.
There's a quote he uses that
Yeah.
it floored me. He says they're preparing for a life that feels expensive before it even begins.
And isn't that just the perfect summary of the modern Western burden? It captures it so concisely. The anxiety isn't just about succeeding anymore.
No, it's about constantly trying to outrun the rising cost of everything, of just existing.
We see it so clearly in the housing market, right? The dream of owning a home, something that was a given for previous generations, is just pushed further and further out of reach.
Or the mountain of debt that comes with higher education. They're starting their professional lives already in a massive hole.
So even though they might have more individual cultural freedom, the trade-off is often this paralyzing economic anxiety. The margin for error is razor thin.
You can't afford to fail.
You really can't. Failure isn't just a learning experience. It's perceived as a personal and a financial catastrophe. And you see this amplified in the most competitive fields, tech, finance, law, where the churn is constant.
They feel like they have to hustle and grind 24/7 just to maintain the illusion of standing still.
That's it, exactly. It's an achievement-based anxiety that's incredibly draining.
Okay, so now let's shift gears and look at the other side of Oceania, the Pacific Islands. He mentions places like Fiji, Tonga, Samoa.
And here, the pressure is completely different. It's not that hyper-individualistic, capitalist performance anxiety. It's the profound, intense weight of collective duty.
A totally different gravitational pull, as he puts it.
A different universe, almost. For a young person there, their individual success is, well, it's not really their own.
It belongs to the community.
It belongs to the village, to the family, to the culture. Their achievements are a reflection on the collective, and that is an immense weight to carry.
And that's layered on top of some really acute existential challenges.
Absolutely. You've got fundamental economic issues like a lack of infrastructure or limited local industries, and then you have the big one, the ever-present terrifying reality of climate anxiety.
We really need to pause on that for a moment because Lóng Tíng makes it so clear that this isn't some abstract, future tense worry for them.
It's not abstract at all. For a student in, say, Sydney or Melbourne, climate change might be a serious policy problem they debate in a tutorial.
Right. It's about carbon targets and international agreements.
But for a young person in Tuvalu or in the low-lying coastal areas of Fiji, it's an immediate physical threat. It means watching your ancestral land literally disappear.
It's the saltwater intrusion contaminating your fresh water supply.
It's the direct impact on your food security because the weather patterns have gone haywire and the crops are failing. Their anxiety is not theoretical. It's rooted in the very ground beneath their feet, which is actively eroding.
And to be carrying that burden
Yeah.
while also trying to navigate the same fast-moving digital world as everyone else and trying to honor and protect traditions that feel fundamentally threatened,
Yeah.
it's almost unimaginable.
It is. And that clash creates the profound push-pull effect that defines their lives. Lóng Tíng isolates 3 specific struggles that really capture this tension.
What's the first one?
The first is the painful conflict between wanting to stay close to home, to your roots, your family, your culture, but knowing you absolutely have to leave.
You have to leave just to get the opportunities.
To get the education, the income, the growth that your family and your community desperately need you to get, it often means migration or temporary work programs.
That's the ultimate loyalty conflict, isn't it? That's a heartbreaking choice.
It's a classic no-win scenario for the heart. If you leave, you might achieve financial success. You might fulfill that duty. But you risk feeling like you've betrayed your core identity, that you've sacrificed your cultural connection for capital.
But if you stay, you keep your identity, you honor your roots, but you risk economic stagnation, not just for you, but for the entire family unit that's depending on you sending money home.
Exactly. There's no easy path. And the second conflict builds right on top of that one. It's the desire for professional opportunity, which usually demands a very Western-style, individualistic drive and ambition.
While carrying the constant, tangible responsibility of family and culture.
Yes. In many of these cultures, the moment you graduate or get a good job, your paycheck isn't yours. It belongs, in large part, to the collective.
Which means your personal ambition is never truly just your own.
Never. Your success is immediately rerouted to support siblings' education, parents' healthcare, community projects. And while that collective care is a beautiful and powerful thing,
Lóng Tíng points out that it can also be a profound drain.
a drain on the very energy you need for that sustained long-term focus, you're constantly forced to choose the immediate obligation over your own abstract future potential.
And what's the third struggle he identifies?
It's the desire for authentic self-expression, to be able to voice your own identity, your opinions, your personal truth.
But you're always afraid of being seen as disrespectful.
Disrespectful to your elders, to cultural norms, to tradition. It's the friction between the Western ideal of self-actualization and the communal necessity of maintaining social harmony.
I find that one particularly tough. The idea of having to suppress your own truth just to keep the peace.
It is. And all of this external noise, driven by these three immense conflicting pressures, it forces us to completely rethink what we even mean by the word focus.
Right, because how can you possibly achieve the kind of disciplined focus you need to, say, study for a final exam or launch a business when your internal world is being torn apart by these choices every single day?
You can't, not in the traditional sense. And that's why Lóng Tíng suggests that for them, focus has to become something else first. It has to become an intense act of internal protection.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me, because he completely pivots from the typical Western idea of focus.
He does, the Silicon Valley idea of focus.
Exactly. The hustle culture idea, which is all about maximizing productivity, about output, about grinding harder. He throws that out the window.
He does, because it's not fit for purpose in this context. For the youth of Oceania, he says, focus is a means of survival. It's defensive. It's intimate.
And this is his core insight, isn't it? Drawing on his East Asian philosophy. He says focus is not about pushing harder. It's about protecting what matters.
That is the fundamental reversal. And it's so powerful when the outside world is overwhelming. When you are overstretched and overextended, the goal has to shift. You stop demanding more output from yourself.
And you start preserving your critical inner resources.
Precisely. Focus becomes the shield that you use to keep your internal world from shattering.
He breaks that shield down into three distinct elements of protection. The first one, and you could argue it's the most important, is protecting your inner direction from external pressure.
Which speaks directly back to that fog of obligation we were talking about. It's about developing the discipline to actually distinguish between two paths.
The path society or your family dictates for you.
And the path that your authentic self genuinely needs to walk. The external pressure is relentless. It's constantly telling you what success should look like. The specific job, that specific salary, marrying this specific person.
So focus, in this sense, is about creating a boundary, a quiet space where you can actually hear your own internal compass over all that noise.
Yes, it ensures you're not just drifting between roles that other people have defined for you. Because that is the fast track to a kind of profound slow burnout.
Okay, and the second element of protection.
Protecting your dreams from distraction.
And he's not just talking about putting your phone on silent, is he? The distraction he's describing is much deeper, much more existential.
That's the critical nuance. For a young person in a stable, developed nation, distraction is often a simple lack of discipline. It's scrolling on Instagram instead of writing your essay.
But here,
distraction is what he calls the tyranny of the urgent. Imagine you're in a Pacific Island community that's just been hit by a cyclone. Or you're in a Western city and your parent just lost their job.
the immediate crisis takes over everything.
It has to. It's the necessary crisis that constantly pulls all your attention and all your energy away from any long-term vision you might have.
So protecting a 10-year dream, it requires this intense, intentional act of setting aside today's chaos, even for a short time, even when every instinct is telling you to focus on the immediate fire in front of you.
It's incredibly difficult, and it can feel counterintuitive to their sense of duty, but it's essential.
And the third element of protection, he says, is protecting your identity from comparison. This one feels universal in the digital age, but he argues it's magnified in Oceania.
It is, because the contrast is so stark. A young person there is comparing their own immediate, often resource-limited reality, which is heavy with duty and responsibility.
Against these two idealized, often false constructs.
Exactly. On one hand, you have the curated, glossy, seemingly effortless lives they see on global social media platforms.
Which we all know is a fantasy.
And on the other hand, they might be comparing themselves to the lives of successful relatives who emigrated years ago. And those relatives' own struggles are often hidden behind a veneer of financial success. No one talks about the loneliness or the hardship.
So if you're a young person and you're defining yourself against that kind of mythical external standard, you start to chip away at your own unique identity, at the very roots you're trying so desperately to honor.
Yes. So focus, in this sense, allows you to stay grounded in your own reality, to move at your own pace, and to value your own unique cultural context.
So if focus is this act of protection, this shield,
Yeah.
how does someone actually start building it?
Mhm.
His suggestion is, I have to say, deliberately simple, almost anticlimactic.
It is. It's non-heroic by design. It's a simple, actionable grounding technique. 25 minutes of deep focus followed by 5 minutes of intentional breath.
And I can see how some people would react to that. I mean, given the intense, multi-layered problems we've just spent all this time describing, 5 minutes of breathing can feel, well, a little inadequate.
You can sound like a luxury they can't afford. For that young person in Suva with urgent family needs, or the Australian student juggling 2 part-time jobs just to pay rent.
Exactly. Where do you even find that 30 minutes? And does Ling King address that practicality?
He does, and he does it by reframing the technique completely. He doesn't call it a productivity hack. He calls it a small doorway into clarity.
A doorway. I like that.
It's not about finding 8 hours of uninterrupted silence. That's impossible for them. It's about creating a tiny, sacred, non-negotiable anchor in your day that reorients your mind.
So by starting small, just 25 minutes, it respects the reality of their situation, that their cognitive and emotional energy reserves are already profoundly depleted.
Precisely. You aren't starting with a demand for discipline, you're starting with an act of replenishment. And the 5 minutes of breath are the crucial release valve. It's a signal to the nervous system that for just this brief moment, you are safe, you are anchored.
And his argument is that it's the consistency of that small act, not some initial burst of heroic effort, that eventually builds the capacity for deeper, longer focus.
That's the whole philosophy. It's a gentle ramp up.
That makes a lot of sense. It reframes the action from discipline to necessary maintenance.
Right.
Like charging your phone.
Exactly. And this maintenance is so necessary because of the underlying psychological reality, which Ling Ting calls the epidemic of quiet overwhelm.
This is such a critical distinction.
Yeah.
Because our typical image of overwhelm is, loud. It's frantic energy, it's visible stress, it's shouting.
But he says that across large parts of this region, that's not how it looks. The cultural norms, whether it's the stoicism of competitive Western society or the emphasis on quiet strength in Fa Samoa, the Samoan way, they mandate resilience.
You're expected to be strong, you don't complain.
You don't air your dirty laundry, you don't show weakness, and so the overwhelm becomes soft. It turns inward, it's hidden, constantly simmering just beneath the surface.
But the stressors are still there. The economic strain, the academic pressure, the community obligations you can never refuse, that low-level hum of climate anxiety, the comparison, the digital noise.
It's all still there, but because you can't express it outwardly, it manifests in other ways.
That's quite exhaustion.
Yes. It shows up as excessive overthinking, where your mind is just replaying every single possible negative scenario on a loop without ever finding a resolution.
And I think this one is so visible today, it manifests as endless, purposeless scrolling.
That's a huge one, because the mind isn't looking for more discipline in that moment. It's desperately searching for a place to rest, a place to disconnect from the internal noise. It's a survival response, a search for temporary relief.
And that leads to that really gentle but profound reminder in his writing. He says, you don't need more strength. You need more breath. You need a moment to return to yourself.
It's a deeply compassionate antidote, because normally when we can't focus, what do? We criticize ourselves. We think, I'm so lazy, I'm so undisciplined.
Right. And that just adds another layer of stress.
It does. It frames the problem as a lack of discipline, so the solution becomes self-punishment and more effort, which leads directly to burnout. But if you reframe the problem as quiet overwhelm, the solution becomes space, compassion, and regrounding.
It validates the immense invisible weight these young people are carrying.
Exactly. And the ability to focus only really begins once the mind has been given permission to land, to be briefly anchored.
Okay, so moving from that deeply personal inner world of focus and overwhelm, we have to talk about how these conflicts manifest outwardly when young people actually trying to speak up and communicate.
And that transition to the outer world is incredibly complex because, as Ling Ting points out, communication in Oceania is not a simple transaction. It's a highly layered process.
It carries so much accumulated weight.
A huge amount. When a young person there speaks, they're not just sharing information or giving their opinion. They're trying to navigate this dense, intersecting web of cultural codes, deep indigenous values, community expectations.
And at the same time, often the expectations of Western directness that they need for school or for business.
It's like trying to speak multiple languages of respect and belonging all at the same time. It must be exhausting.
And every word, and just as importantly, every silence, has these profound implications for whether they're seen as respectful or assertive, or whether they're risking being alienated from their community.
Yes. Let's dive into the specific examples he gives because they really bring this complicated subtext to life. The first one is the young Maori woman. She's brilliant, confident, articulate at university. She excels in debate.
But then she goes home.
She goes back to her marae, her home community, and she holds back. She becomes quiet. And this is what he calls the Maori respect conflict.
So her silence isn't a lack of confidence.
Not at all. It's a deliberate, calculated act. The university environment rewards individualized, articulate assertiveness. That's a value of Western society. But at home, that same behavior could easily be seen as violating protocols of respect for her elders.
Because they hold greater mana or knowledge?
Precisely. So she's not silent because she's scared. She's silent because she is actively choosing to respect the established hierarchy. She's code switching between two completely valid but conflicting communication systems.
And that must take a huge amount of energy.
An incredible amount. Then you have the second example, the Fijian student. He wants to be honest. He sees an issue with a project or in the community, and he wants to voice his concerns.
But he's terrified of being seen as disrespectful.
And this highlights the deep conflict between honesty and disrespect. In many Pacific cultures, the principle of vo is paramount. That's the idea of social harmony, of maintaining the relational space between people.
And direct confrontation shatters that harmony.
It can. Even if the young person is 100% factually correct, a direct challenge can cause someone, especially an elder or an authority figure, to lose face. And in that context, disrupting the harmony is often seen as a greater failure than simply omitting a difficult truth.
So they're constantly doing this calculus in their head. Not just, is what I'm saying true, but what is the social cost of me saying this truth right now?
Exactly. And that need for indirectness, for finding a way to hint at the truth without stating it bluntly, can be paralyzing when you need quick, clear action.
And we can't just focus on the Pacific Islands. He gives a Western example, too. The Australian student.
Yes. The one who can passionately debate any national policy, any global issue. She can argue about economics, politics, anything.
He's fierce.
That's the one. And this illustrates a different, but equally restrictive, cultural code. In those Western high-achieving environments, there's immense pressure to project an image of capability, of emotional control, of stoicism.
You have to seem like you have it all together.
You do, so she can grapple with any external complexity you throw at her. But the moment the conversation turns inward to her own anxieties, her vulnerabilities, her mental health struggles, the cultural code demands silence.
So the fear isn't of disrespecting an elder. It's the fear of being labeled.
Labeled as weak or incapable or not a team player by her peers and her professional network. For her, the great unspoken isn't a hard truth about a project, it's her own personal vulnerability.
So if these are the traps and the codes, then really understanding the subtext is essential. For anyone trying to mentor or lead or even just communicate with youth in Oceania.
It is. You have to recognize that what isn't being said is often more important than what is.
And that means learning to navigate these different layers.
3 layers, specifically. First, you have to recognize that silence carries meaning. You have to learn to ask, is this silence a sign of respect? Is it deep thought? Is it disagreement? Or is it internalized pain? It's almost never just empty space.
Right.
Second, you have to understand that directness carries risk. The risk of causing a cultural rupture, of being seen as disrespectful, of alienating yourself. This forces young people to develop incredibly high levels of emotional intelligence just to gauge how much truth a conversation can safely handle.
And third, you have to learn to perceive the emotion that moves beneath the surface like a quiet tide.
That's a beautiful way to phrase it. The real feeling. The anxiety about the future, the resentment over the weight of duty, the passion for change, it's often submerged. It's hinted at through metaphor or body language or what's left unsaid rather than being declared outright.
So for anyone listening who works with or leads young people in this region, learning to read these layers It's the key. It's how you build trust. It's how you create that protected space we keep talking about.
It's the only way.
If the external world is so full of noise and duty and these complex communication codes, then it makes sense that the internal groundwork has to be meticulously maintained. Which brings us to the next section, self-reflection and the path to ethical leadership.
And Lingting is very clear on this. Before any young person can hope to lead others effectively, they first have to profoundly understand themselves.
But he reframes self-reflection. It's not an indulgence.
It's orientation, not indulgence. And that reframing is crucial. Because in many of these cultures, which prioritize collective responsibility and immediate tangible work, sitting around and thinking about yourself can be seen as, well, as selfish.
As a self-centered luxury, a distraction from your actual duties.
Exactly. But Lingting argues that without that internal compass, any external action you take will be chaotic. It'll be ineffective. Or worse, it will just be a replication of what everyone else expects of you. You won't be leading, you'll just be conforming.
And to help combat that drift, he provides a specific set of questions. And these are not easy questions. They're designed to act as that compass, to guide young people back to their own core.
They demand a kind of brutal honesty. He starts with the one that forces them to separate themselves from all those external demands. Who are you beneath the expectations of family, culture, community, and society?
That's a huge question. It's asking you to strip away all the roles you play, all the masks you wear, and find what's left, your authentic essence.
It is. And then he moves on to ambition. What dreams are truly yours?
Which is so important for disentangling what you genuinely want from what you feel you should want to please your family or your community.
And then there's a very practical question, which connects directly back to that idea of quiet overwhelm. What nourishes you instead of depleting you?
That's about energy management, isn't it? In an environment where you are constantly giving, constantly on duty, you have to consciously identify your sources of replenishment.
Whether that's a cultural practice or just rest or a creative outlet, it's essential for sustained movement to avoid chronic exhaustion.
And the final question is the one that really defines integrity. What values guide you when no one is watching?
That's the core of it all. That is the moment you define your personal ethical code separate from any social reward or punishment. It's about who you are when it's just you.
His conclusion is so powerful. He says that without this orientation, young people will inevitably drift between roles. They become reactive.
But with this self-knowledge, they can start to consciously build a life that's aligned with who they are genuinely becoming, a life they can actually own and steer.
And having that internal alignment is the necessary preparation for overcoming the next major hurdle he identifies, which is this shared hesitation right across Oceania to ask for help.
It's a huge paradox, isn't it? That the very people who are meant to become future leaders are often the most afraid to reach out. But again, he stresses that this isn't about pride or arrogance.
No, the roots are much deeper.
They're deeply cultural and psychological. It comes from that intense pressure to appear strong, from the fierce sense of responsibility they carry for their families, and from a deep-seated fear of disappointing the people who have sacrificed so much for them.
So the belief that strength has to be quiet and self-sufficient becomes this massive barrier.
A barrier to accessing the very support, the mentorship, the resources that could help them succeed. It creates a devastating feedback loop.
You're quietly overwhelmed, but the cultural code forbids you from showing the weakness of asking for help, which is the only thing that would alleviate the overwhelm.
And the source material just reframes this so beautifully. It states that true leadership begins with reaching out. The first real act of courage is admitting your own vulnerability.
It's saying, I don't have all the answers, or I need help with this, or I need your expertise.
Yes. And that act of reaching out will inevitably involve setbacks. People will say no, you'll get criticism, you'll face that dismissive silence we talked about earlier.
But Lingting reframes those outcomes. He says they're not failures, they're just data points.
Data points for movement. He reinterprets the results of asking for help. A no is not a personal rejection. It is simply redirection.
A sign that you need to change your approach or maybe ask a different person.
A yes is momentum. And the key to it all is consistency. It's the persistence, the act of continuing to move forward despite the setbacks that forms the path, not getting a perfect yes on the first try.
By framing rejection as redirection, it removes so much of that cultural shame that's associated with not succeeding immediately.
It gives them permission to be imperfect.
So if we pull all of this together and look to the future, what kind of leadership is this region actually calling for?
Well, Ling Ting's argument is unequivocal on this point. Oceania does not need to be rescued by outsiders. It needs profound empowerment generated from within by its own self-aware youth.
And he identifies 5 crucial qualities that will define this new generation of leaders. Qualities that manage to integrate the wisdom of tradition with the urgent needs of modernity. The first is that they must be skilled at honoring their roots while dreaming boldly.
And that's a delicate balancing act. It means deeply respecting the vast wisdom that's embedded in traditional knowledge, things like ancestral navigation techniques or sustainable land practices, but not letting those traditions become shackles that prevent progress.
So a future leader in, say, Fiji's environmental policy sphere would need to be able to translate ancient principles of collective stewardship
Into modern, effective environmental legislation. They have to be able to bridge those two worlds seamlessly.
which leads directly to the second quality. You need to be fluent in bridging tradition and innovation.
This is the practical application of the first point. It means actively translating core cultural values, like collective care or a deep respect for the ocean, into modern solutions.
So, for example, using traditional storytelling methods in a digital marketing campaign for sustainable tourism.
Or using communal decision-making structures to help design new tech platforms that actually serve the community's needs. It's about finding the synergy, not seeing them as opposites.
Third, they must choose clarity over noise and purpose over panic.
And this is the direct result of everything we've been discussing, of mastering focus as protection and self-reflection as orientation. In a world that's full of urgent distractions, climate events, economic shocks, it's the leader with that steady, purposeful action rooted in their inner clarity who will be effective.
They'll be able to lead rather than just react to crisis after crisis.
Exactly. The fourth quality is a massive structural requirement for the entire region. They must commit to collaborating across islands, cultures, and communities.
The fragmentation of Oceania, geographically and culturally, has always been a challenge.
It has, and future leaders must learn to think regionally. They have to move beyond narrow national or island-specific self-interest to tackle the big, shared challenges. Things like regional security, climate-induced migration, and sharing resources.
And finally, the fifth quality. They must be leaders who hold ethical leadership close to their heart.
This is the bedrock. Given the high stakes, the deep responsibilities, the weight of community they carry, leadership has to be driven by integrity, by the well-being of the collective, not by personal power or personal gain.
And that ethical foundation is born directly out of those challenging self-reflection questions he posed earlier.
It is. It's the bedrock of Oceania's future strength and its stability.
Wow. We have really journeyed through an intense analysis today. From identifying that paralyzing lack of clarity facing Oceania's youth, all the way to embracing focus as an act of protection and self-reflection as a tool for orientation.
It's a lot to take in.
It is, but the sources leave us on a really optimistic note, a profound affirmation. It says that Oceania's youth is not divided, it's not lost. It is undergoing a profound awakening.
An awakening. It's a demanding transition, for sure. A necessary shift in consciousness that they have to make to meet the twin challenges of the 21st century, globalization and climate change, while still holding on to their deep ancestral roots.
And the call to action from Ling Ting that comes at the end is just, it's so resonant. He says, you don't need certainty to begin, you just need movement.
And that one sentence just evaporates all the pressure. The pressure to have it all figured out, to have the perfect 10-year plan before you even take the first step.
It does. And the actionable guidance that follows is so restorative, so gentle. Begin softly, begin imperfectly, begin quietly, begin even when you're afraid.
It's an instruction for sustainable, self-compassionate action. The whole philosophy hinges on the quality of the movement, not the speed. The young people of Oceania don't need to sprint. They just need to keep moving with heart, with clarity, and with intention.
And that steady, consistent intentionality. It's the thread that connects everything, from the 255 focus technique all the way to those big, challenging self-reflection questions. It's all about the cumulative effect of small, intentional decisions.
Exactly.
So we would just zoom out one last time and connect this deep dive back to Ling Ting's wider framework of Global Leadership Insights 2030. You can see this profound link between the micro struggle of a single young person trying to find their focus and the macro trajectory of the entire region.
And not just the region, the entire world. The future, globally, is not going to belong to the loudest voice. It won't belong to the most frantic activity or the person who best masters the urgency of the moment.
It will belong to those who cultivate the discipline to walk with intention.
To walk with intention long enough for their quiet, consistent footsteps to actually matter. In Oceania, this means building the future moment by moment, breath by breath, decision by decision.
So the young people who master that quiet, steady intentionality, that ability to protect their inner direction and lead ethically from their core values.
They won't just define the success and the resilience of their own region. They'll be offering a profound and desperately needed model of leadership for the rest of the world to follow.